Where? Where am I? What the hell? Did we not just go to sleep? Anyone there? I'm here. Great, the last person I wanted to be here. Well, too bad. So sad. What? Rough luck for you. Oh, I hate when you do that. I dislike it myself. But it does appear we are in a plane of oblivion. Plane of oblivion? Are you mad? No, quite sane, really. Also, it appears to be Mehrunes Dagons. How can you tell? He has a specific way of coloring his world. Also, he hates me. Well, isn't that splendid? So I get caught in the middle of your spout, is it? Well, yes and no. You see, he was one of the first people to wear me, but I rebuked him. Wait, you can rebuke people? You mean you can get off of me? Yes, but I like you. Let's get moving. Oh. Don't you control my legs? Then you better move forward. Fine. I do believe we're at a dead end. Yeah, I could see. Oh, that's disgusting. It's pretty normal for here. So, where's my cameraman? Smabb, are you there? I'm sorry, but your cameraman, as you put it, isn't allowed here. Oh, fuck. That's not good. I could use him to get me out of here right now. Truly is a shame, but the Psychic Order is not allowed here. The Psychic what? I'm sorry. Did he not tell you he was a monk of the Psychic Order? I just knew he was a monk and he could do timey-wimey things and he had a cat that came through portals. Oh, die, creature! Being fed is oh so nice. Well, at any rate, you seem to know this place, and I imagine if I die, you go to the nearest creature? Person, actually, so if you die here, I'll die here. So what you're saying is we work together? Yes. Oh. As much as I hate those words, I believe we can do that. Are you alright? No, it's the ash. I don't think it agrees with me. remember, all of these towers need to be dealt with. How do you know that?
Oh!
Another body of mine that I inhabited tried this once before. Really? Yes, it did not, as you would say, go well.
Oh!
So then, how exactly are you here if it didn't go well? Mayroon shunted me and the body back to the mortal plane. Back here, little bitch. Well, isn't that interesting? Is that the person I killed? As a matter of fact, yes. That is a death knell. Oh, it's also an elevator. Should have known that. Back down you go. So what? What is Mayroon's Dagon actually like, seeing as you were bonded to him? Horrible person. Narcissistic as all fuck. And a seriously bad poker face. Really? I have no reason to lie. What was that? Oh, just demonic blood. Would you stop that? It's not like I mean to. It's just something so compatible about you. Well, knock off the compatibility, will you? I can attempt. Wow, did you actually just accede to my request? I guess I did. So you can be nice. When I want. Oh, so why is there a delay? I choose my words carefully here. Better, as one would say, safe than sorry. Right. So, I imagine we want to get in there. Yes. You dealt with that tower. Now, we deal with the other. Perhaps even get inside. I don't like any of this, but if it gets me home... Not guaranteed. Stop it! I told you I don't want to, but like I said, it's not guaranteed. What do you mean it's not guaranteed? Well, I can't 100% guarantee we'll get out alive. Great. So then, let's try and be the most helpful we can to each other. Where in the hell? Oh, you died. Alright, so let's start climbing the tower. What about your stealth sneaky attack? Honestly, right now, I just want to get out, so... No. Why do we do that? Why do we do that? Our voices, they're fusing more. And we don't like it. I don't like it one bit when that happens. Neither do I, but it does appear to be improving us. So, despite the drawback, keep trying it, right? Possibly. Alright. Okay, we're back where we came. A loop-de-loop. Great. Did you just roll your lettering? How can you do that? I'm a creature inside your brain. I can do what I want. Ooh, I didn't like that. Did you just rip out his heart? I didn't mean to. Please don't tell me we're about to eat it next. No! I wouldn't dare. That'd be disgusting. Where is that noise coming from? do hate this place. Alright, that one open. Which means we need a key. That's apt, considering we're trying to destroy it. Yes.
Over here! Quickly!
Who are you? That one had a key on him.
Over here! Quickly, quickly, there's no time. You must get to the top of the large tower. The Sigil Keep, they call it. That's what keeps the Oblivion Gate open. Find the Sigil Stone. Remove it and the gate will close. Hurry! The Keeper has the key.
Alright. Though I am curious as to... Whoa. Okay, not curious enough to fall off. We're moving. Also, what was that strike against his cage for? Well, it's either you leave alive, or you stay, die, or you turn into Nora. The last one's worse than death. I knew you could be nice. Quiet. Not nice. I just figured you wouldn't want it on your conscience. Like I said, nice. Say that again, and I will scramble you. Fine. We need a torch. There we go. You just robbed another Deja of its heart. What is wrong with you now? I don't know. It's kind of just happening. And I don't like it. Get over here. That burns. I think this is what we are now. Even if we don't like it. I think I'm slowly understanding why we're taking the hearts. But I cannot be sure. More power. We will need it. Or rather, I will need it. I'm coming for you, bastards. You can't defeat me, for we are one and proper. Here it is. I think it's a decent time, seeing as this may be the last proper adventure, that we read a book. The last book in our Baronzaya series. And with our combined power, I might even be able to channel your these new words are weird in this body, to myself. And together we can read. Anjivan, Salivan, Hajrivanaraj. Hey, where am I?
This looks like... Why the fuck am I in the... Why am I in the Oblivion Plane? Someone has a lot to say, and a lot that I'm a bitch slap for.
Oh, come on.
Whoa! What the fuck?
Oh. Okay, so let me, these words are still new, tell you what happened.
I get the idea of what happened. You ended up becoming one fucking person, which is the worst thing that could have happened.
It was either that or we perish. Work as a... Perhaps. That's new. Work as a team or die alone. And I didn't want to die, he didn't want to die, so this is what we have. And I'm channeling the power of these Daedra hearts so that you can be here, read the book, as I don't think we're longed to be together for much longer.
Smart idea with the Daedra hearts. Very powerful magic item. But...
No buts, just get to the book.
Whoa. Hey. No need to be grouchy. Thankfully, I brought some water to this hellish plane. It's always a good idea to keep some on you.
Mind if I have some?
Sure.
That is refreshing, I believe the word to be.
Yeah, the word is refreshing. Shall I get on to the book? Umbra Ergin?
Ooh, I like that name.
I figured if you're one person, you may as well have a combined name.
Umbra Ergin. I like it.
Alright. Here we go. The possible final book. And hey, at least it's the final real Baron Zaya book, so if this is the last time I get to actually see you, at least we get to cap it off with the final book.
I feel the same way.
Alright. The Real Baron Zaya, Part 5. Written by Anonymous. As Samachus had predicted, the theft of the Staff of Chaos had few short-term consequences. The current Emperor, Uriel Septim, sent some rather stiff messages expressing shock and displeasure at the staff's disappearance, and urging Samachus to make every effort to locate its whereabouts and communicate developments to the newly appointed Imperial battle mage, Jaeger Thorn, in whose hands the matter had been placed. Thorn! Samachus thundered in disgust and frustration as he paced around the small chamber where Baron Zaya, now some months pregnant, was sitting serenely embroidering a baby blanket. Jaeger Thorn, indeed. I would give him directions for crossing the street if not for he was a doddering old blind sot. What have you against him, love? I just don't trust that mongrel elf, part dark elf, part high elf, and part the gods only know what. All the worst qualities of all his combined bloods, and, I'll warrant, no one knows much about him. Claims he was born in southern Valenwood of an elven mother. Seems to have been everywhere since. Baron Zaya, sunk in contentment and lassitude of pregnancy, had only been humoring Samachus thus far, but now she suddenly dropped her needlework and looked at him. Something had piqued her interest. Samachus, could this Jaeger Thorn have been the nightingale disguised? Samachus thought this over before replying. Nay, my love. Human blood seems to be in the one missing component in Thorn's ancestry. To Samachus, Baron Zaya knew that was a flaw. Her husband despised wood elves as lazy thieves and high elves as effete intellectuals, but he admired humans, especially Bretons, for their combination of pragmatism, intelligence, and energy. The Nightingales of Ebonheart of the Ratham clan, House Halau, the House of Mora in particular, all be bound. That house has had human blood in it since her time. Ebonheart was jealous that the staff was laid here, where Tiber Septim took the horn of summoning from us. Baron's sighed a little. The rivalry between Ebonheart and Mournhold reached back almost to the dawn of Morrowind's history, once the two nations had been one. All the lucrative mines held in fief by the Athams, follow whose nobility retained the high kingship of Morrowind. Ebonheart had split into two separate city-states, Ebonheart and Mournhold. When Queen Leanne's twin sons, grandsons of the legendary King Morlane, were left as joint heirs, at about the same time, the office of High King was vacated in favor of a temporary war leader to be named by a council in times of provincial emergency. Still, Ebonheart remained jealous of her prerogatives as the elder city-state of Morrowind, first among equals, was the phrase its ruler often quoted, and claimed that rightful guardianship of the Staff of Chaos should have been entrusted to its ruling house. Mournhold responded that King Morlane himself had placed the staff in keeping of the god Efen, and Mournhold was unarguably the god's birthplace. Why not tell Yegar Tharn of your suspicions, then? Let him recover the thing. As long as it's safe, what does it matter who recovers it or where it lies? Samachis stared at her without comprehension. It matters, he said softly after a while. But I suppose not that much, he added. Certainly not enough for you to concern yourself further with it. You sit there and tend to your... And where he smiled at her, wickedly, embroidery. Baranziah flung a sampler at him. It hit Samachis square in the face, needle, thimble, and all. In a few more months, Baranziah gave birth to a fine son, whom they named Helseth. Nothing more was heard of the Staff of Chaos, or the Nightingale, however. If Ebonheart had the staff in its possession, they certainly did not boast of it. The years passed swiftly and happily. Helseth grew tall and strong. He was much like his father, whom he worshipped. When Helseth was 8 years old, Baranziah bore a second child, a daughter, to Samachis' lasting delight. Helseth was his pride, but little Morgaya, named for Samachis' mother, held his heart. Sadly, the birth of Morgaya was not the harbinger of better times ahead. Relations with the Empire slowly deteriorated for no apparent reason. Taxes were raised and quotas increased with each passing year. Samachis felt the Emperor suspected him of having a hand in the staff's disappearance, and thought to prove his loyalty by making every effort to comply with the escalating demands. He lengthened working hours and raised tariffs, and even made up some of the difference from both the royal exchequer and their own private holdings. But the levies multiplied, and the commoners and nobles alike began to complain. It was an ominous rumble. I want you to take the children and journey to the Imperial City, Samachis said, at last in desperation, one evening after dinner. You must make the Emperor listen, else all Mournhold will be up in revolt come spring. He grinned forcibly. You have a way with men, love. You always did. Baranziah forced a smile of her own. Even with you, I take it. Yes, especially with me, he acknowledged admirably. Both children? Baranziah looked over toward a corner window where Helseth was strumming a lute and crooning a duet with his little sister. Helseth was 15 by then. Morgaya was 8.
They might soften his heart. Besides, it's time Helseth was presented before the Imperial Court.
Perhaps, but that's not your true reason. Baron Zaya took a deep breath and grasped the nettle. You don't think you can keep them safe here. If that's the case, then you're not safe here either. Come with us, she urged. He took her hand in his.
Baron Zaya, my love, heart of my heart, if I leave now, there'll be nothing for us to return to. Don't worry about me. I'll be alright. All I can take...
The words.
I'll be alright, I can take care of myself. And I can do it better if I'm not worrying about you or the children.
Baron Zaya laid her head against his chest. Just remember that we need you. I need you. We can do without the rest of it if we have each other. Empty hands and empty bellies are easier to bear than an empty heart. She started to cry, thinking of the nightingale and that sordid business with the staff. My foolishness has brought us to this pass. He smiled at her tenderly.
If so, 'tis not so bad a place to be.
His eyes rested indulgently on their children. None of us shall ever go without...
None of us shall ever go without or want for anything, ever, ever, my love. I promise you. I cost you everything once, Baron Zaya. I end Tiber Septim. Without my aid, the Empire would never have begun. I helped its rise.
His voice hardened.
I can bring about its fall. You may tell Uriel Septim that my patience is not infinite.
Baron Zaya gasped. Samachis was not given to empty threats. She'd no more imagined that he would ever turn against the Empire than that the old house wolf lying by the great that the old house wolf lying by the gate would turn on her. How? She demanded breathlessly when he shook his head.
Better that you don't know, he said. Just tell him that I told you. Should he prove recalcitrant, and do not fear, he's septim enough that he will not take it out on the messenger.
He smiled grimly.
For if he does, if he ever harms the least hair on you, my love, or my children, so help me all the gods of Tamriel, he will pray that he hadn't been born. I'll hunt him down, him and his entire family, and I won't rest until the last septim is dead. The red, dark elven eyes of
Samachis seemed brightly in the ebbing firelight.
I plight you that oath, my love, my queen, my Baron Zaya.
Baron Zaya held him as tight as she could, but in spite of the warmth in his embrace, she couldn't help shivering. Baron Zaya stood before the Emperor's throne, trying to explain Mournhold's straits. She waited weeks for an audience with Uriel Septim, having been fobbed off on his pretext or that His Majesty is indisposed, An urgent matter demands His Excellency's attention. I'm sorry, Your Highness, there must be some mistake. Your appointment is for next week. No, see, and now that it wasn't going very well, the Emperor did not even make the slightest pretense of listening to her. He hadn't invited her to sit, nor had he dismissed the children. Helseth stood still as a carven image, but little Morgaya had begun to fuss. The state of her own mind did not help her any. Shortly after, upon arrival at the lodgings, the Mournholdian ambassador to the imperial city had demanded an entry, bringing with him a sheaf of dispatches from Samachis. Bad news, and plenty of it. The revolt had finally begun, and the peasants had organized around a few disgruntled members of Mournhold's minor nobility, and were demanding Samachis step down and hand over the reins of government. Only the Imperial Guard and a handful of troops whose families had been retainers of Baron Zaya's house for generations stood between Samachis and the rabble. Hostilities had already broken out, but apparently Samachis was safe and still in control, though not for long, he wrote. He entreated Baron Zaya to try her best with the Emperor, but in any case, she was to stay in the Imperial City until he wrote to tell her it was safe to go back home with the children. She tried to barge her way through the Imperial bureaucracy, with little success, and to add to her growing panic, all news from Mournhold had come to a sudden stop. Tottering between rage at the Emperor's numerous major domos and the fear of the fate awaiting her and her family, the weeks had passed by tensely and agonizingly, as well as remorselessly. Then one day, the Mournholdian ambassador came calling to tell her she should expect news from Samachis the following night at the latest. Not through the regular channels, but by Nighthawk. Seemingly by the same stroke of luck, she was informed that same day by a clerk of the Imperial Court that Uriel Septim had finally consented to grant her an audience early on the morrow. The Emperor had greeted the three of them when they came into the audience chamber with a too bright smile of welcome that nonetheless didn't reach his eyes. Then, as she presented her children, he had gazed at them with a fixed attention that was real yet somehow inappropriate. Baron Zaya had been dealing with humans for nearly 500 years now, and had developed the skill of reading their expressions and movements that was far beyond what any human could ever perceive. Try as the Emperor might to conceal it, there was a hunger in his eyes, and something else. Regret. Yes, regret. But why? He had several fine children of his own. Why covet hers? And why look at her with such a vicious, however brief, yearning? Perhaps he had tired of his consort. Humans were notoriously, though predictably, inconsistent after that one long, burning glance. His eyes had shifted away as she began to speak of her mission and the violence that had erupted in Mournhold. He sat still still as stone throughout her entire account, puzzled at his inertia, and vexed no end. Baron Zaya stared into the pale, set face, looking for some trace of the Septims she'd known in the past. She didn't know Uriel Septim well, having met him once when he was still a child, and then again at his coronation 20 years later. Twice. That was all. He'd been a stern and dignified presence at the ceremony, even as a young adult, yet not icily remote as their more mature man was, in fact, despite the physical resemblance, he did not seem to be the same man at all. Not the same, yet something about him was familiar to her. More familiar than it should have been. Some trick of posture or gesture. Suddenly she felt very hot, as if lava had been poured over her. Illusion! She had studied the arts of illusion well since the nightingale had deceived her so badly. She had learned to detect it, and she felt it now, as certainly as a blind man could feel the sun on his face. Illusion, but why? Her mind worked furiously, even as her mouth went on reciting the details of Mournhold's troubles. Vanity? Humans were often ashamed at the signs of aging, as elves were proud to exhibit them. Yet the face Uriel Septim wore seemed consistent with his age. Baranzaya used none of her own magic. Even petty nobles had means of detecting magicka, if not actually shielding themselves from its effects within their own halls. The use of sorcery here would bring down the Emperor's wrath as surely as drawing a dagger would. Magic. Illusion. Suddenly she was brought to mind of the nightingale, and then he was sitting before her. Then the vision changed, and it was Uriel Septim. He looked sad, trapped, and then the vision faded once more. And another man sat in his place, like the nightingale, and yet unlike. Pale skin, bloodshot eyes, elven ears, and about him a fierce glow of concentrated malice, an aura of eldritch energy, a horrible, destructive shimmer. This man was capable of anything. And then once again, she was looking into the face of Uriel Septim. How could she be sure she wasn't imagining things? Perhaps her mind was playing tricks on her. She felt a sudden, vast weariness, as if she'd been carrying a heavy burden too long and too far. She decided to abandon her earnest narrative of Mournhold's ills, as it was quite plainly getting her nowhere, and switched to pleasantry. Pleasantry, however, with a hidden agenda. Do you remember, sire? Samachis and I had dinner with your family shortly after your father's coronation. You are no older than tiny Morgaya here. We were greatly honored to be the only guests that evening, except for your best friend, Justin, of course. Ah, yes, the Emperor said, smiling cautiously, very cautiously. I do believe I recall that. You and Justin were such friends, Your Majesty. I was told he died not long after. A great pity. Indeed, I still do not like to speak of him. His eyes turned blank, or blanker, if it had been possible. As for your request, my lady, we shall take it under advisement and let you know. Baranzaya bowed, as did the children. A nod from the Emperor dismissed them, and they backed away from the Imperial presence. She took a deep breath when they emerged from the throne room. Justin had been an imaginary playmate, although young Uriel had insisted a place be set for Justin at every meal. Not only that, Justin, despite the babyish name, had been a girl. Samachis had kept up the joke long after she had gone the way of imaginary childhood friends, inquiring after Justin's health, whenever he and Uriel Septim met, and being responded to in as mock serious a fashion. The last Baranzaya heard of Justin 7 years ago, the Emperor had evidently joked elaborately to Samachis that she had met an adventurous, though incorrigible Khajiit youth married him, and settled down in the Landril to raise fire ferns and mugworts. The man sitting on the Emperor's divan was not Uriel Septim. The nightingale? Could it be? Yes, yes. A chord of recognition rang through her, and Baranzaya knew she was right. It was him. It was the nightingale, masquerading as the Emperor. Samachus had been wrong. So wrong. What now, she wondered, frantically. What had become of Uriel Septim, and more to the point, what did it mean for her and Samachus in all of Mournhold? Thinking back, Baranzaya guessed that their troubles were due to this false emperor, this nightingale, spawned glamour, or whatever he really was. He must have taken Uriel Septim's place shortly after the unreasonable demands on Mournhold had begun. That would explain why relations had deteriorated for so long, as humans reckon time. Long after her disapproved liaison with Tiber Septim, the Nightingale knew of Samachus' famed loyalty and knowledge of the Septim House, and was effecting a preemptive strike. If that were the case, they were all in terrible danger. She and the children were in his power here in the Imperial City, and Samachus was left alone to deal with troubles of the Nightingales brewing in Mournhold. What must she do? Baranzaya impelled the children ahead of her, a hand on each shoulder, trying to stay cool, collected. Her ladies-in-waiting and personal knights escort trailing behind. Finally, they reached their waiting carriage, even though their suite of rooms was only a few blocks from the palace. Royal dignity forbade travel on foot, even short distances, and for once, Baranzaya was glad of it. The carriage seemed a kind of refuge now, false as she knew the feeling must be. The boy dashed up to one of the guards and handed him a scroll, then pointed toward the carriage. The guard brought it to her. The boy waited, eyes wide and shining. The epistle was brief and complimentary, and simply inquired if King Edware of Wayrest of the province of High Rock might be granted an audience with the famed Queen Baranzaya of Mournhold, as he had heard much of her and would be pleased to make her acquaintance. Baranzaya's first impulse was to refuse. She wanted only to leave this city. Certainly she had no inclination toward any dalliance with a dazzled human. She looked up, frowned, and one of the guards said, "Lady, the boy says his master awaits your reply yonder." She looked in the direction indicated and saw a handsome elderly man on horseback, surrounded by half a dozen courtiers and cavaliers. He caught her eye and bowed respectfully, taking off a plumed hat. "Very well," Baranzaya said to the boy on impulse. "Tell your master he may call on me tonight, after dinner." King Edware looked polite and grave, and rather worried, but not in the least love-struck. At least that was something, she thought pensively. Baranzaya stood at the tower window, waiting. She could sense the familiar's nearness, but thought the night sky was clear as the day to her eyes. She could not see him. Then suddenly there was a swift-moving dot beneath the wispy night clouds. A few more minutes and the great night hawk finished its descent, wings folding, talons reaching for her thick leather armband. She carried the bird to its perch, where it waited, panting as her impatient fingers felt for the message secured in a capsule on one leg. The hawk drank mightily from the water till she had done, then ruffled its feathers and preened. Secure in her presence, a tiny part of her consciousness shared its satisfaction at a job well done. mission accomplished, and rest earned. Yet beneath it all was unease. Things were not right, even to the humble avian mind. Her fingers shook as the unfolding of thin parchment and pored over the cramped writing. Not so much as bold hand. Baronzaya sat slowly, fingers smoothing the document while she prepared her mind and body to accept disaster calmly. If disaster would it be? Disaster it was. The Imperial Guard had deserted Samachus and joined the rest. Oh, my voice is breaking. I apologize. The Imperial Guard had deserted Samachus and joined the rebels. Samachus was dead. The remaining loyal troops had suffered a decisive defeat. Samachus was dead. The rebel leader had been recognized as King of Mournhold by Imperial envoys. Samachus was dead. Baronzaya and the children had been declared traitors to the Empire, and a price set upon their heads. Samachus was dead. So the audience with the Emperor earlier that morning had been nothing but a blind, a ruse, a charade. The Emperor must have already known. She was just being strung along, told to stay put, take things. She was just being strung along, told to stay put, take things easy. Milady Queen, enjoy the Imperial City and the delights that it has to offer. Do make your stay as long as you want. Her stay, her detention, her captivity, and, in all probability, her impending arrest. She had no delusions about her situation. She knew the Emperor and his minions would never let her leave the Imperial City. Never again, at least. Not alive. Samachus was dead. Milady? Baronzaya jumped, startled by the servant's approach. What is it? The Breton is here, milady. King Edward. The woman added helpfully. Noting Baronzaya's incomprehension, she hesitated. Is there news, milady? She said, nodding toward the Nighthawk. Nothing that will not wait, Baronzaya said quickly, and her voice seemed to echo in the emptiness that suddenly yawned like a gaping abyss inside her. See to the bird. She stood up, smoothed her gown, and prepared to attend on her royal visitor. She felt numb as the stone walls around her, numb as the quiescence of the night air, numb as a lifeless corpse. Samachus was dead. King Edward greeted her gravely and courteously, if a bit fulsomely. He claimed to be a fervent admirer of Samachus, who figured prominently in his family's legends. Gradually, he turned the conversation to her business with the Emperor. He inquired after details, and asked if the outcome had been favorable to Mournhold. Finding her non-committal, he suddenly blurted out,
Milady Queen, Milady Queen, you must believe me. The man who claims himself the Emperor is an impostor. I know it sounds mad, but
No, Baronzaya said with sudden decisiveness. You are entirely correct, my Lord King. I know. Edward relaxed into a seat for the first time, eyes shrewd.
You know? You're not just humoring someone you might think a madman.
I assure you, my lord, I am not. She took a deep breath. And who do you surmise is dissembling as the king?
The Imperial Battle Mage, Diego Thorn.
Ah, my lord king, have you perchance heard of someone called the Nightingale?
Yes, milady. As a matter of fact, I have. My allies and I believe him to be one and the same man as the renegade Thorn.
I knew it. Baron Zaya stood up and tried to mask her upheaval. The Nightingale. Yagar Thorn. Oh, but the man was a demon, diabolical and insidious, and so very clever. He had contrived their downfall seamlessly, perfectly. Samachus, my Samachus. Edward coughed diffidently.
Milady, we need your aid.
Baron Zaya smiled grimly at the irony. I do not believe I should be the one saying those words, but go on, please. Of what assistance might I be, my lord king? Quickly the monarch outlined a plot. The mage, Rhea Silmain, of late, apprenticed to the vile Yagar Thorn, had been killed and declared a traitor by the false emperor. Yet she had retained a bit of her powers, and could still contract a few of those she had known well on the mortal plane. She had chosen a champion who would undertake to find the Staff of Chaos, which had been hidden by the traitorous sorcerer in an unknown site. This champion was to wield the staff's power to destroy Yagar Thorn, who was otherwise invulnerable. Rescue the true emperor being held in another dimension. However, the champion, well, thankfully still alive, now languished in the imperial dungeons. Tharn's attention must be diverted while the chosen one gained freedom with Rhea's spirit's help. Baron Zaya had the false emperor's ear, seemingly his eyes. Would she prove the necessary distraction? I suppose I could attain another audience with him, Baron Zaya said carefully. But would that be sufficient? I must tell you that my children and I have just recently been declared traitors to the Empire. Oh no. Hiccups.
In Mournhold, perhaps, milady. And Morrowind. Things are different here in the Imperial City and the Imperial Province. The same administrative morass that makes it near impossible to retain an audience with the Emperor and the Ministries also quite assures that you would never be unlawfully imprisoned or otherwise punished without benefit of due legal process. In your case, milady, and your children's, the situation is further exacerbated by your royal rank. As queen and heir apparent, your persons are considered inviolable, sacrosanct. In fact, the king grinned, the imperial bureaucracy, my lady, is a double-edged claymore. So at least she and the children were safe for the time being. Then a thought struck her. My lord king, what did you mean earlier when you said I had the false emperor's eyes? And seemingly at that. Edward looked uncomfortable. It was whispered among the servants that Yagar Thorn kept your likeness in a sort of shrine in his chambers.
I see. Her thoughts wandered momentarily to that insane romance of hers with the Nightingale. She had been madly in love with him, foolish woman, and the man she had once loved had caused to be killed by the man she truly did love. Loved. He was gone now. She still couldn't bring herself to accept the fact that Samachus was indeed dead. But even if he is, she told herself firmly, my love is alive and remains. He would always be with her. As would the pain of the rest of her life without him. The pain of trying to survive each day, each night, without his presence, his comfort, his love. The pain of knowing he would never see his children grow to a fine pair of adults, who would never know their father. How brave he was, how strong, how wonderful, how loving. Especially little Morgaya. And for that, for all that, and for that, for all that you have done to my family, Nightingale, you must die. Does that surprise you? Edware's words broke into her thoughts. What surprised me? Does your likeness in Thorn's room? Oh, her features set impersibly. Yes and no. Edware could see from her expression that she wished to change the subject. He turned once again to their plans. Our chosen one may need a few days to escape, milady. Can you gain him a bit more time? You trust me in this, my Lord King? Why? We are desperate, milady. We have no choice, but even if we did, why, yes, I would trust you. I do trust you. Your husband has been good to my family over the years, and Lord Samachis is dead. What? Baron Zaya related the recent events quickly and coolly. Milady, Queen, but how dreadful. I'm so sorry. The first time Baron Zaya's glacial poise was shaken, in the face of sympathy, she felt her outward calm start to crumble. She gathered her composure and willed herself to stillness. Under the circumstances, my lady, we can hardly ask. Nay, good milord, under the circumstances, I must do what I may to avenge him upon the murder of my children's father. A single tear escaped the fortress of her eyes. She brushed it away impatiently. In return, I ask only that you protect my orphaned children as you may. Edward drew himself up. His eyes shone. Willingly I do so pledge, most brave and noble queen. The gods of our beloved land, indeed Tamriel itself, by my witness. His words touched her absurdly, yet profoundly. I thank you from my heart and my soul, good my Lord King Edware. You have mine and my children's everlasting gratitude. She broke down. She did not sleep that night, but sat in a chair beside her bed, hands folded in her lap, thinking deep and long into the waxing and waning of the darkness. She would not tell her children, not yet, not until she must. She had no need to seek another audience with the Emperor, though a summons arrived at first light. She told the children she expected to be gone a few days, bade them give the servants no trouble, and kissed them goodbye. Morgaya whimpered a bit. She was bored and lonely in the Imperial City. Helseth looked dour, but said nothing. He was very like his father. His father. At the Imperial Palace, Baron Zaya was escorted, not into the great audience hall, but to a small parlor where the Emperor sat at a solitary breakfast. He nodded and greeted and waved his hand toward the window. Magnificent view, isn't it? Baron Zaya stared out over the tower of the great city. It dawned on her that this was the very chamber where she'd first met Tiber Septim all those years ago. Centuries ago. Tiber Septim, another man she had loved. Who else had she loved? Samachis, Tiber Septim, and Straw. She remembered the big blonde stable boy with sudden and intense affection. She never realized it till now, but she had loved Straw, only she had never let him know. She had been so young then. Those had been carefree days, halcyon days, before everything, before all this, before him. Not so much as the nightingale. She was shocked in spite of herself. The man could still affect her, even now, even all that had happened. A strong wave of inocate emotions swept over her. When she turned back at last, Uriel's septum had vanished, and the nightingale sat in his place. You knew, he said quietly, scanning her face. You knew instantly. I wanted to surprise you. You might at least have pretended. Baranzaya spread her arms, trying to pacify the maelstrom churning deep inside her. I'm afraid my skill at pretense is no match for yours, my liege. He sighed. You're angry. Just a little, I must admit, she said icily. I don't know about you, but I find betrayal a trifle offensive. How human of you. She took a deep breath. What do you want of me? Now you are pretending. He stood up to face her directly. You know what I want of you. You want to torment me? Go ahead. I'm in your power, but leave my children alone. No, I don't want that at all, Baranzaya. He came near, speaking low, and in the old caressing voice that had sent shivers cascading through her body. The same voice that was doing the same thing to her here and now. Don't you see? This was the only way. His hands closed on her arms. She felt her resolve fading, her disgust at him waning. You could have taken me with you. Unbidden tears gathered in her eyes. He shook his head. I didn't have the power. But now... I have it all. Mine to share, mine to give, mine to have. To you. Once more, he waved his hand toward the window and the city beyond. Old Tamriel is mine to lay at your feet, and that is only the beginning. It's too late. You left me to him. He's dead. The peasant's dead. A scant few years, what do they matter? The children can be adopted by me, and we'll have others together, Baranzaya. Oh, and what children they'll be. What things we shall pass on to them. Your beauty, my magic. I have powers you haven't even dreamt of. Not in your most untamed imaginings. He moved to kiss her. She slipped his grasp and turned away. I don't believe you. You do. You know. You're still angry. That's all. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Tell me what you want, Baranzaya. Baranzaya, my beloved. Tell me. It shall be yours. Her whole life flashed in front of her. The past, the present, and the future still to come. Different times, different lives, different Baranzayas. Which one was the real one? Which one was the real Baranzaya? For by that choice, she would determine the shape of her fate. She made it. She knew. She knew who the real Baranzaya was, and what she wanted. A walk in the garden, my liege, she said. A song or two, perhaps? The nightingale laughed. You want to be courted? And why not? You do it so well. It's been long, besides, since I've had the pleasure. He smiled. As you wish, milady Queen Baronzaya. Your wish is my command. He took her hand and kissed it. Now and forever. And so they spent their days in courtship, walking, talking, singing and laughing together, while the Empire's business was left to subordinates. I'd like to see the staff, Baronzaya said idly one day. I only had a glimpse of it, you'll recall. He frowned. Nothing would give me greater pleasure, heart's delight, but that would be impossible. You don't trust me? Baronzaya pouted, but softened her lips when he leaned in for a kiss. Nonsense, love. Of course I do, but it isn't here, he chuckled. In fact, it isn't anywhere. He kissed her again, more passionately this time. No talking riddles again. I want to see it. You couldn't have destroyed it. Ah, you've gained in wisdom since last we met. You inspired my hunger for knowledge somewhat. She stood up. The Staff of Chaos can't be destroyed, and it can't be removed from Tamriel. Not without the direst consequences to the land itself. Oh, I was meant to do that in her voice. Imagine that. Ah, you impress me, my love. All's true. It is not destroyed and it is not removed from Tamriel. And yet, as I said, it isn't anywhere. Can you solve the puzzle? He pulled her from him, and she leaned in his embrace. He's a greater riddle still, he whispered. How does one make one of two? That I can and will show you. Their bodies merged, limbs tangled together. Later, when they had drawn a bit apart and he lay dozing, she thought sleepily. One of two, two of one, three of two, two of three. What cannot be destroyed or banished might be split apart, perhaps. She stood up, eyes blazing, and started to smile. The Nightingale kept a journal. He scribbled entries onto it every night after quick reports from underlings. It was locked in a bureau, but the lock was a simple one. She had, after all, been a member of the Thieves' Guild in a past life. In another life. Another Baronzaya. One morning, Baronzaya managed to sneak a quick look at it while he was occupied at his toilet. She discovered that the first piece of the Staff of Chaos was hidden in an ancient dwarven mine called Fang Lair, although its location was given only in the vaguest of terms. The diary was crammed with jotted events and an odd shorthand, and was very hard to decipher. All Tamriel, she thought, in his hands and mine, and more perhaps, and yet, for all his exterior charm, there was a cold emptiness where his heart should have been, a vacuum of which he was quite unaware, she thought. One could glimpse it now and then, when his eyes would go blank and hard, and yet, though he had a different concept of it, he yearned for happiness too, and contentment. Peasant dreams, Baronzaya thought, and straw had flashed before her eyes again, looking lost and sad, and then Theris, with a feline Khajiit smile, Tiber Septim, powerful and lonely, Samachus, solid Samachus, who did what ought to be done, quietly and efficiently. The Nightingale, a riddle and a certainty, both darkness and light. The Nightingale, who would rule all and more, and spread chaos in the name of order. Baronzaya got reluctant leave from him. to visit her children who had yet to be told of their father's death and of the Emperor's offer of protection. She did finally, and it wasn't easy. Morgaya clung to her for what seemed an era, sobbing wretchedly, while Helseth ran off into the garden to be alone, afterward refusing all her attempts to speak to him on the subject of his father, or even to let her hold him to her breast. Eadware called on her while she was there. She told him what she had discovered so far, explaining that she must remain a while yet and learn more as she could. The Nightingale teased her about her elderly admirer. He was quite aware of Eadware's suspicion, but he wasn't the least bit perturbed, or no one took the old fool seriously. Baronzai even managed to arrange a reconciliation of sorts between them. Eadware publicly recanted his misgivings, and his old friend, the Emperor, forgave him. He even afterward invited to dine with him, at least once a week. The children liked Eadware, even Helseth, who disapproved of her mother's liaison with the Emperor and consequently detested him. He had become surly and temperamental as of the days that had passed, and frequently quarreled with both his mother and her lover. Eadware was not happy with the affair either, and the Nightingale took great delight at times in openly displaying his affection for Baronzaya, just to nettle the old man. They could not marry, of course, for Uriel Septim was already married. At least, not yet. The Nightingale had exiled the Empress shortly after taking the Emperor's place, but had not dared harm her. She was given sanctuary by the Temple of the One. It had been given out that she was suffering from ill health, and rumors had been circulated by the Nightingale's agents that she had mental problems. The Emperor's children had likewise been dispatched to various prisons all across Tamriel disguised as schools. She grew worse in time, Nightingale said carelessly, referring to the Empress and eyeing Baronzaya's swollen breasts and swelling belly with satisfaction. As for their children, well, life is full of hazards, isn't it? We'll be married, your children will be my true heir. He did want the child, Baronzaya was sure of that. She was far less sure, however, of his feelings for her. They argued continually now, often violently, usually about Helseth, whom he wanted to send away to school in Somerset Isle, the province furthest away from the imperial city. Baronzaya made no effort to avoid these altercations. The Nightingale, after all, had no interest in a smooth, unrifled life, and besides, he thoroughly enjoyed making up afterward. Occasionally, Baronzaya would take the children and retreat to the old apartment, declaring she wanted no more to do with him, but he would always come to fetch her back, and she would always let herself be fetched back. It was ineffable, like the rising and setting of Tamriel's twin moons. She was 6 months pregnant before she finally deciphered the location of the last staff piece. An easy one, since every dark elf knew where the Mount of Dagoth was. When she next quarreled with the Nightingale, she simply left the city with Eadware and rode hard for High Rock and Wayrest. The Nightingale was furious, but there was little he could do. His assassins were rather inept, and he dared not leave his seat of power to pursue them in person. Nor could he openly declare war on Wayrest. He had no legitimate claim on her or her unborn child. True to form, the imperial city's nobility had disapproved of his liaison with Baronzaya, as they had so many years ago of Tiber Septims, and were glad to see her go. Wayrest was equally distrustful of her, but Eadware was fanatically, and was fanatically loved by his prosperous little city-state, and allowances were readily made for his eccentricities. Baron Zaya and Edware were married a year after the birth of her son by the Nightingale. In fact, in spite of this unfortunate fact, Edward doted on her and her children. She, in turn, did not love him, but she was fond of him, and that was something. It was nice to have someone, and Wayrest was a very good place for children to grow up. Well, they waited, and bided their time, and prayed for the champion's success in his mission. Baron Zaya could only hope that he wouldn't take very long. Whoever this unnamed champion was, she was a dark elf, and she had all the time in the world. All the time. But no more love left to give, and no more hatred left to burn. She had nothing left. Nothing but pain and memory. Nothing but pain, memories, and her children. She only wanted to raise her family, and provide them a good life, and be left to live out what remained of hers. She had no doubt it was going to be a long life yet, and during it she wanted peace, quiet, and serenity of her soul as well as of her heart. Peasant dreams. That was what she wanted. That was what the real Baron Zaya wanted. That was what the real Baron Zaya was. Peasant dreams. Peasant dreams. Now that was a hell of a series. A lot happened, and I didn't pronounce everything properly.
You sure didn't, but I enjoyed it all the same.
Thank you. But I do believe I feel the mortal realm ripping me back. So, do me a favor.
Sure.
Take care of that human body you got there. He was a rather good guy.
I'll do our best. Now, to grasp it.
And so the Book Hunter and Umbra fought on, found Dagoth, and killed him, thus allowing the people of Tamriel peace once more. How do I know this, you may ask? Simply because I'm the Sigicorder's librarian. Have a great day, and an even greater week.